Well, hello, Musa. This is Thinking Around the Question, where you're going to think around a question. I don't know what you're going to talk about or what you want to ask about, but you're going to do it. And in case people don't know, Musa, you're a consultant psychiatrist, a scientist, very much a sort of practicing Muslim, if that's the phrase, practicing. And here I am, a social anthropologist, full of questions, trying to understand what makes sense in the world. And I'm not quite sure I do know what makes sense in the world, with a range of different identities. So look, why don't we kick off? I don't think we're going to get to any conclusions. If people are looking for fast, easy answers, 5 hacks into life, this is thinking around the question. It isn't fast food, but it's flavoursome, right? Is that there? But what are we going to talk about today?
Oh, well, Jonathan, it is Ramadan, and a couple of weeks ago, I think you told me that you were fasting. You were on some kind of, you're talking about intermittent fasting, and perhaps you were on some kind of 36-hour fast or something. I didn't quite get it. And I thought that'd be an interesting topic to take up, isn't it? Why do we fast? What's going on with fasting? What is it all about? Let's do an episode on that.
Okay, I think that's very good. I should point something out in advance.
Yeah.
If any of my family happen to be watching, they will be laughing. Because
Okay.
I'm on a new diet every week. I have a new eating regime, which I take very seriously for about 5 days. Um, so yeah, just a point. It wasn't just that one week I was doing intermittent fasting. The week before I was probably not eating carrots, and the week after that I was probably just eating potatoes. We can talk about my relationship with food as well. But you want to talk about fasting, or do you want to talk about fasting in
Well,
Ramadan? Are they the same thing?
no.
What
Well,
is Ramadan?
Ramadan.
I don't even know.
It's a month. Oh, come on, you must know.
It's
It's a
a
month.
month. It's a
Yeah,
month. I don't know when it happens or what you do. You probably pray and eat some food. I
okay.
don't
So
know.
it is a month of fasting in the Muslim religion where people do not eat or drink, or for that matter, smoke or have sex during daylight hours. Yeah. During the whole month, uh, there is a focus on worship and closeness to God, and to Allah. There's also a focus on charitable acts, on increasing one's level of piety. There's lots of different aspects to the month. Lots of people, not everybody, they uh, go into seclusion for the last 10 days of the month in a mosque. This is called itikaf. There's lots of different aspects that are going on. There are much longer prayers that are read. There are additional prayers in addition to the 5 main prayers. There's a prayer at night called the Taraweeh prayer, and there is a morning prayer called the Tahajjud prayer, which many people attend. It's a very social month, because uh, diets change, calendars change, work life changes, and in a Muslim country or in a Muslim society, everybody kind of changes or adapts their schedule to fit around it. But essentially, it is a month where. Uh,
Are you allowed to answer your phone in Ramadan?
who is that? 1 minute, give me a minute.
Ah,
Let me just find out who this is. I'll have to answer this. Should we restart then? I'll put this. I'll put this phone away.
no, I think that's fine. I mean, you give up
Yeah.
food, you give up drink, you give up. Well, you say, I mean, just give it up for the daytime. Uh, you're praying longer, but modern life continues.
Of course, Monland. Did you?
That's
Okay.
that's very nice. I mean, do you think if there was Ramadan now, you'd have to give up your phone in the daytime too? If it was
What do you mean?
well, if,
What do
if
you mean?
if these rules date back from a pre-digital age and then some, uh, if it was rewritten now, do you
Oh, okay.
think
Yeah. No,
that would you
no. I
think we'd
don't think
address the
actually.
digital?
No, no. So yeah, Jonathan. The important thing actually is that there are some things that you don't give up and you continue. You don't give up work. You don't give up your day-to-day activities. One thing that you're not supposed to do is sleep through the whole fast. All of these kind of things. You have to continue. In fact, in when Islam was founded, people used to go to war whilst they were fasting. You know, not everybody, but it's important that you continue your day-to-day function. But it's about giving up something that would otherwise be lawful or be permissible. That's what Ramadan is about. We can get to the philosophy of it a bit later, but I'm kind of more interested about your type of fasting. What's that? What's going on there, Jonathan?
This moment of giving something up in order to get control, really.
Mm,
When I intermittent fast, so I
yeah.
mean, once again, I'm driven by the new scriptures of the internet and the
Okay.
trends of the internet. This is now my holy book. And of course, as I look at things on health, as I get older, I look at more stuff on health as well. That sends me into more stuff on health. And a key part of health is diet. By the way, I notice
Mm,
as soon as we talk about health, our views go up a bit. It must be something people pick up on health.
really?
Look, I'm trying to encourage it now. So what happens with health is the food is very important, and
Mm,
I'm just I'm about 78, 79 kilos. Well, sometimes I get to 80, and I think that this is too much, and I can feel it, and my joints ache a bit more because I've read that being overweight affects inflammation. So then of course they ache more because I feel overweight, or perhaps they ache more because I am overweight. I'm not quite sure which is which. And then I'd like to sort of really come down to about 73 kilos. I think that'd be a nice spot, but I've not done it yet. So I'm very careful with what I eat. But of course I'm not, because I graze. I always have grazed. I emotionally eat. Dr. Musa, when I'm a bit kerfuffled, I start putting things in my mouth, as my therapist sister would say, an oral fixation. She said you could just get yourself a dummy, and it'll probably do the same trick without the calories. But I'm trying to sort of. I'm always eating, and
yeah.
if I'm very disturbed, I really am almost eating. So one of the things the intermittent fasting does, where I stop for 18 hours, eat in a 6-hour period, or I stop for 12 hours and eat in 12 hours, is it controls by an easy rule the picking of food. And the picking of food also leaves me feeling a bit heavy and a bit lethargic, possibly because I've read that's what it does. And now I think it does do that. I'm not quite sure. So it gives me some structure to avoid grazing and to avoid emotionally eating. Uh, Pretty much that's what it does.
Ah, okay.
That's, but also it, after the 36-hour fast, which I think I'll do about once a month, because I read do it once a month, not because I
Hmm.
have anything other than that to go on in one article. Uh, but I felt so clear. I could have kept not eating, but I understand it starts to eat the muscle tissue, and it's hard enough to build that stuff up. So I don't really want to lose that. And that's how I do it. That's my well, at least that was my fast while you last talked to me. What am I on now? Olives and nuts and seeds.
Ah, okay. So the 36-hour. I mean, I'm sure you allow yourself fluids and liquids in that, right?
Yeah, so I can put it so I can have black coffee. I can have. See, it's been
Mm.
handed down to me. I can have. So what I drink is green tea, black coffee. I do black tea, but I don't particularly fancy it, and then and water. But as long as I don't put milk in it or soy milk or whatever, as long as I don't
Oh,
put
okay.
a foodie thing in it, it counts. So I tend to
Wow.
drink a bit more coffee and a lot more water.
So let me just understand something about your. Is it for health reasons? Is it for weight related reasons, or is it a way of just controlling the noise? The food noise. The Is it a way of kind of restructuring your life? What do you think?
Can I tick all of the above?
Yeah.
And probably a few more. Yeah, it's all of
Well,
those.
what are the few more then?
Let me have a think. what else is it to do? But it sort of controls my behaviour a bit. I suppose that's what you were
Mm.
talking about, the noise. But if we break that down, it controls sort of more impulsive behaviours, which aren't necessarily pleasant. Because I find myself just walking up and down the kitchen and then coming back to the fridge. And I try to avoid bread now, not because I don't like it, I love it, but because I'll have small little bits of bread and put something on it, and then eat that, and then walk backwards and forwards a bit. I get very locked in my mind, and that's not good. It doesn't feel good. Of course, when the weight comes off, it feels better. It's not particularly bad, but I want it. It feels so much better, and it feels better
Mm.
with the exercise. Um, what were the other reasons? I can't remember. What else do I do? I think it's healthy. I think I'm eating more healthy food. I mean, I'm always trying to eat pretty healthily anyway. Drives everyone nuts, but you know,
Sure.
I feel different, and I don't like fast food. Well, I quite like fast food, but very very rarely.
I'm just wondering, whether you and me, in very different ways, they're very different fasts, they're done for ostensibly very different reasons, you know. But are we getting at the same thing in this kind of age of overabundance where, food is essentially. So I have a brother, younger brother. He's a GP. He's always complaining. I mean, he looks in great shape to me. He goes to the gym, works out. Um, and one thing he came around and said to me the other day, it made me laugh. He said, Musa, food is the enemy. It is my enemy. Because he's constantly struggling with this. I should say that this was his personal discussion with me rather than medical advice. But I suppose the thing is, um, in this age of overabundance, where we get all these, high calorific foods, where we get these ultra processed foods, where food is all around us, um, and kind of low quality, cheap food is around us. How do we deal with that, except by some kind of um, self negation, by not taking what we can take and what would be easy to take, or imposing some kind of rule or structure or order on ourselves.
Wow, you are on a different fast. I mean, yeah, when you said I think we might be on a different fasting for different reasons, I was thinking probably not. I'm not totally convinced by your fast. I know that sounds disrespectful, but I'll
Hmm.
explain why in a minute. Um, but actually, as you talk about it, you're in a far more reflective mood. Mine's
Hmm.
quite functional.
Sure.
I I see it as it's a series of inputs and a removal of inputs. Uh, but I don't have a deep philosophical reflection on life through my fasting. But because you're fasting as part of a very reflective period,
Mm.
you're looking at it very differently. I'd like to know more.
I don't know. Well, Jonathan, the first thing I would say is that most Muslims. I'm just talking about most Muslims, the practice of Muslim. Our fasting is not very healthy. We get up in the morning. Nowadays, about 5 o'clock, to eat, and we eat heavily. As a family, right? And we pray and we do other things. Then we don't eat anything, including water or food, until maybe 5:30. I think right now it's 5:30. Is winter. Um, and or their winter fast, so it's easier. And then when we'll break the fast at 5:30, we'll probably break it with the family, with a date and some kind of snacks, some cultural cuisine, pray, and then we'll eat some more. And many people, most Muslims, I don't think they lose weight at all during the month of fasting. They probably put quite a lot on actually, because. Of course, that's not the way that you should do it, but that is the way that it is done. It's so it's less about the uh, calorific or health benefits. Although, of course, you'll find all these Muslim websites and Muslim scholars telling you about the health benefits of Ramadan, and there'll be radio programs. And I'm sure I will be invited as a doctor to a few as well to do a few programs, and I will do them. But it's not really about the health benefits, although if done properly, there are. Um, I think it's more about the worship, their philosophy, the sense of um, forbidding yourself something that would otherwise be perfectly permissible for you, and reflecting upon what that means. I think that's really the purpose of Ramadan.
So, so we're back into this sort of restriction in order to
Mm,
what does it bring? Sorry, what is the? Because I don't think it sounds like a particularly heavy fast. I mean, to do it for a month is, I suppose, for do it one
mm,
off. But you're just eating. You're eating in the evening hours, so you're eating after
yeah,
sunset and before sunrise, which is not too hard to keep it up for a month. Is tricky. You're filling your days with more prayer time than you'd have.
mm,
You're not smoking during the day. Well, who smokes much anymore? But okay, you're not smoking through the day. You're not drinking. You're not drinking anything through the day.
yeah, yeah.
You're not
Actually,
having a bottle of water.
no. So
Ooh,
the most difficult fasts are in the summer in in Muslim countries in the Middle East, in Asia, where temperatures can be up to 35, 40 sometimes, and the fast is from maybe 4 in the morning to 9 or 10 at night, right? Those are the most difficult fasts. Um, yeah, but even those, they're not too difficult for a fit and healthy individual. There are exemptions if you're sick or if you're unwell. You don't have to fast. Or if you're traveling, you can make up the fast later. Um, but essentially, it is a simple fast. I couldn't imagine Jonathan doing a 36-hour fast. That just sounds
it's
like
easy.
madness to me. Is it easy?
That's astonishingly easy. But I'm trying to get back to it. So
Mm.
you're pushing the limits of a non-healthy body. It's almost like survival of the fittest. Um, you're not allowed to have sex until the evening,
Yeah.
presuming you're getting any at all. What else are you not meant to be doing?
Swear, fight.
So you can
You know,
swear and fight. Hang on, you can swear and fight during the day, any other
well,
time.
I
You can
suppose,
swear, fight, smoke a packet of 20, and have a load of sex. I mean, this sounds like you've gone from an idealistic life, which maybe I
yeah.
had very briefly in my 20s, uh, uh, into sort of it sounds a bit like life at 60. Um, what what are you, what is going on? What to you is going on? You keep referring to the shoulds. If I did it as I should do it, what's going on there?
No, well, I mean, I of course I keep the fast. I obey the laws. But I think the thing is, um, whenever Ramadan comes around, this is a personal reflection. I'm always in a state of tension, you know. So I'm always right now. It's the beginning of Ramadan, so I'm trying to read the whole Quran, which I try and do every Ramadan. I get to about the 10th or 12th or 15th day, uh, then I generally give up. I was actually thinking that it's not been probably been 15 odd years since I actually completed the whole of the Quran in Ramadan. So there's this state of tension. There are these extra prayers I try to get to. I don't always manage it. There is the kind of, trying to make sure that one doesn't overdo it after they break their fast, in the evening that they keep to a honest amount. And I don't do that. I mean, there's issues with, I think discipline and control, Jonathan, and spending enough time in the worship. I keep meaning I should really take those 10 days out at the end and sit at the calf, but I never really get around to it. So there's lots of things personally for me that it kind of also brings back for me a level of spiritual practice, and trying to perfect that and realizing where I'm not quite getting to. It's a constant aspiration or striving.
Okay, can I look at two things there? I want to
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
the
go on.
spiritual practice, but I will do that a second. I'll make a note because I definitely want to talk about that. I want to talk about your relationship with authority and rules because that
Oh yeah.
seems to be what's really going on. Is you're confronting your aspirations, with your expectations, with your right to be ruled over by a set of rules, which you will then navigate, perhaps as best you can, but pragmatically. What is your relationship with authority?
I don't know. I think you'd have to ask me some further questions about that. If I was driving a car and a police asked me to stop, I would stop. I wouldn't. I wouldn't look to pick a fight with them. I'd be very respectful to the police officer.
And
What
if
exactly
the Royal College of Psychiatry told all psychiatrists that they were to fast for a week, would you do it?
Why would I do that?
Well, I'm asking you. Why
No,
would you?
why
You'd
would I?
question
Yeah,
it.
of course, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, who I disagree with all of the time. Sometimes I think they don't stand up for psychiatrists as much as they should do. Sometimes I think they're politically a little bit too correct. That body has a function, and I'm only going to accept things which serve that function, right? I have respect for my colleagues and for the body as a whole, but not
But if they
beyond what
told
they
you to
could do.
fast, you wouldn't do it.
No, unless
So
unless they
why?
could, yeah.
So why'd you do it if Freud had said fasting was part of the way of us learning to be a psychiatrist? Would you have gone through that ritual?
I hmm.
You wouldn't have known any different.
Uh, there's lots of things that I have done because I've been told that that's part of the way. I was in Balint group and other things for 3 years, and learning about how to deliver psychodynamic psychotherapy and all of these other things, and I accepted that was part of the way. But ultimately, um, I undertake this because this is a divine command. It's from God. I accept that authority.
Okay, just to
Yeah,
backtrack for people, you said you were part of a Balint group, which I
yeah.
know what that is. What is a Balint group, just in
It's
case
a, it's
people
a,
don't?
it's a it's a group amongst often amongst professionals, certainly amongst psychiatrists, to reflect on sort of difficult cases and the emotions that evokes, and the kind of transference or the baggage that is, and the counter transference that is brought up within those patient doctor relationships. It's a fascinating group.
It is fascinating.
Yeah,
I've been to a Balint group, and
is
they
it?
have weekends, don't they? I mean, it's a brilliant thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But we'll talk about Balint another day. Maybe get some people in and chat to them about it. So you're there following these rules
Yeah.
from these rules
From on high.
their own
From on
high.
high. Yeah, yeah. There's a religious
Why? And do you question it at all?
uh I mean, it's in the Quran. I mean, I've questioned the Quran in my lifetime. I have come to a settled agreement in my own mind with that. And so once you accept a certain authority, I suppose it's the same thing as trying to train to be a psychiatrist or as a doctor. Once you realize that, once I joined medical school, right? And they told me that these are the subjects you had to study, and these were the exams you had to take, and this is what constitutes knowledge. Once I've accepted that authority over me, then I have to follow the path. Otherwise, there's no point in me rebelling in my first or second year, saying, "Well, why are you asking me these questions? They're completely irrelevant to to my practice as a doctor."
So tell me,
It,
as you
it,
sort of reconcile your relationship with the Quran, as you
mm,
reconcile what that is, and it's an animate relationship. The Quran
yeah,
is telling you things, you're asking it questions back, and I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. And you're reflecting on what you read in that and what you hear other people say about it. When it comes to this issue of the fast, what have been the changes you've made, and how have you transformed in your relationship to the fast since in your
Do
life?
yeah, I mean, so maybe I started fasting when I was 15 or 16. Probably I started when I was too young, keeping all of the fast. I was obviously, as young men are, I was keen to get on and to start this initiation. Probably, I wish I'd given it a few extra years where I just, skipped a few and so forth.
Because
But because now I'm somewhat in my early 40s, and it's something I have to do every year. I should have taken the ease when I could have taken it. Now
so
I have to do it. Yeah,
so is this something I didn't understand about fasting in Ramadan? You start at a certain age and you choose when that is.
yeah. I mean, you have to start when your body is ready for it, isn't it? So I think I started when I was 14 or 15, and definitely when I was 16.
Is that a choice you make, or is that a choice that made
Yeah. I
for you?
mean, no, I think it's a choice you make. My son is 14 at the moment. He's intending to keep all the fasts this year.
Is it
Yeah,
is it is it part of becoming an adult or becoming a man? Even is there
I
a sort
think
of machismo to it?
I think it is. I think there is. I think that's my son is going through that at the moment. I think I was going through that at that time as well. But the thing is, my relationship has changed over the years. One of the things that I've understood a lot more over the years about fasting, it's been a slow realization, um, is the philosophy behind it is about negation. And actually, the philosophy behind Islam is about self-negation. So you have to, in Islam, you have to be able to control your impulses, desires, your sense of self before the divine comes in. So, the creed of Islam, as you may know, is that there is no God but Allah. It starts with a negation and then an affirmation. Even in the Arabic, you have to destroy your own gods and your own idols before you can realize God, right? And that's actually the discipline of fasting, especially when it's done properly. Now, I don't do it completely correctly, and I beat myself up for this because I have so many other things going on in my life at the time that I don't think I can fully practice to the spiritual extent or discipline myself as much as I perhaps should do. But it's there in the back of my mind that this is why this is important. You need to be able to let go of your perfectly permissible desires and choices to understand the divine, to be able to get closer to God. Does that make sense?
It sort of does. I mean, it reminds me of stories I've heard from other religious systems. So
Oh
this
yeah.
idea that you renunciate aspects of yourself, or you you challenge habits and behaviours, and you change the direction of things. You disrupt in the modern lingo.
Mm.
In the modern lingo of business, you disrupt the existing system and see what comes out. But what you're saying is you it's not just impulses and desires, but you also disrupt your sense of yourself. What do you mean by that?
I suppose the question is, who are we? Jonathan, at core, what is it that we want? What are we after? You know, are we after um, fulfillment in terms of our material desires? Are we after you know we may be after sort of a beautiful girl and marrying her, and it turns into a fantastic relationship. But after we marry her, then where are we left with that? What really fulfills us? And I think in Islam and many other religious systems, it's not unique to Islam by any means. There is some sense of needing a unity with God or with the divine, and life kind of gets in the way of that, isn't it? You know, so in order to re-achieve that, to relearn that, you need to quieten all of the noise, isn't it? And one of the facts of noise is food. It's our relationship with this thing that we're constantly pecking at, and we never stop. And sometimes we need to impose that discipline to be able to understand what it is that we need to, what else we need to do. And therefore, it can lead to a kind of very profound spiritual experience. Many people, tell me about spiritual experiences which they've had in the context of fasting, which they would not have had otherwise.
So, I mean, I'm going to come back to
Mm,
fasting because if you do it all in 1 month, it's not lifestyle. It's just, even then, I mean, there's some things I see to it. It almost
mm,
reminds me of carnival. There's the release, there's the containment of the day, and then the release in the evening. We can let it all go, uh,
mm.
which actually sounds quite fun. I quite like the idea of that. Um, but uh, but I want to understand your spiritual experience because I've never got a sense of it talking to you. I know this is a major part of your life.
Mm,
This is normally you talk about rule following and
mm.
about morality and about codes of being and things that one should do. Lots of shoulds in there.
Okay.
But
I'll give you a very brief.
let's hear about what
You
this
see,
is to you.
the thing is, Jonathan, spiritual experiences are intensely personal. You know, they're intensely personal. They're things that one cannot easily share. And if I shared them with you, I don't know what you would make of it. I'll give you a really simple example. 2 or 3 days ago was, I think, the first fast of Ramadan. And it just so happened that, I normally see my patients remotely, right? And I really don't like going into the office. But it just so happened that somebody had insisted that they needed me to see me in my clinic, so I went to my clinic to see them. Because I went to see them in the clinic, then I had to have all of the other patients that I was seeing, who I was seeing remotely, But because I didn't have any breaks in the day, I had to spend the whole day in the office, right? And so I also knew it was the first day of fasting, and I would need to be back at such and such a time, and so on and so forth. I scheduled my whole day around this, right? So I packed my bag. Actually went to the gym first. Knew I had a very busy day. Got into the office. When I got to the office, because I don't go in very often, um, I was locked out. Right, I was locked out because I'd forgot the punch code thing, right? Which I normally have as a slip in my wallet, and I didn't have to happen to have my wallet that day, and these kind of things. So I got locked out for 15, 20 minutes. I'm getting very embarrassed, Jonathan. It's extremely embarrassing for a doctor. I knew that there's a patient probably waiting on the other end of the Zoom for me, but I cannot see this patient, right? Because I'm locked out. So I had to ring around, remember what the code was, finally get in. It was very embarrassing. I got in, I spoke to this lady, and then I said, "Well, I'm very, very sorry. I got locked out of my office. Can I see you at the end of the day?" So I add this caseload to the end of the day. Um, and she was very nice about it, very gracious. Uh, and then I suddenly realized, oh, I was supposed to kind of break my fast at that time. I was supposed to be home, right? So I'm just thinking about this and how I don't have any. The office is also cold. It's shivering because I don't have the heating on. Over the winter and all of these kind of things. And I'm seeing these patients, back to back, and it's in the back of my mind that what am I going to do? I put my hand in my bag, right, and it so happens that about 2 months ago, my father had given me some chocolates for the children, which I just put in my bag and hadn't even thought about it. You know, I put my hand in my bag to think about, how am I going to open and break my fast because I'm here in this cold office in the middle of nowhere and I have nothing here. And I get this chocolate in my hand, which is, the Bounty chocolate, right?
Right,
And
tastes
so
like paradise.
well, I don't know. I don't know.
That's
Anyway,
right.
so the point is, I mean, it's a very small example, maybe tray example, maybe means nothing to anybody, right? You know what I mean? But I essentially open my fast, with God's bounty, as it were, right? And
God's what?
bounty,
God's bounty. Yes, yeah,
God's provided bounty,
yeah,
as
yeah.
it were. Do you
Uh-huh.
know? Do you know what I mean? That's meaningful for me. May not be meaningful for anybody else.
So it's just a couple of technicals to get over. When you break
Okay.
your fast, you have to break it because you've not just delayed eating for another hour until you got home.
No, no,
Or
you
do you
have
have
to
to?
break
Do you have to break it on the?
You have to break it at a certain time. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
just eat later.
No, no, it's These are all parts of the actual worship. To fast at a certain time, to start it at a certain time, to break it at a certain time, to remember God at those specific times.
Okay. And by fortune, so if the bounty bar hadn't been in the bag, what would you have done?
I would have just had to wait, isn't it? I wouldn't have been able to break my fast at the appointed time.
And what um, yeah, what does that mean? I mean, someone who doesn't fast to such
Mm.
divine importance, just the importance of influencers. What effect does that have?
Well, I think the thing is that there's many things like this for an individual person of belief, which indicates to them personally their kind of hand of providence, or the idea that there is a relationship, there is something there, right? This is a very small example that I've given you. So the other examples are perhaps more embarrassing, much more intimate, much more personal. Um, there are certain prayers that are answered. There are certain other things that are understood. Now, some people, they talk about having dreams or spiritual experiences. I don't have those, Jonathan. But I certainly have this feeling that there is a constant presence in my life, not just in my personal life, in my clinical life. Certainly with some patients, I see this as well. These things I don't just feel like coincidences.
And I mean, so we're talking about experiences of the divine,
Hmm.
either as manifestations and actions or as sensorial experiences,
Yeah.
uh, with a far greater system of senses than just sight and hearing, if you like. So I'm quite interested in what the first one feels like. You say you feel the first one, but not the second one so much. You feel like there's a presence there, but
Yeah.
it manifests through action most of the time for you.
Sometimes there is a certainty, you know. So there is a particular prayer we do in Islam, which is called the seeking of the good. It's called the istikhara prayer. Some people do this prayer. I did it when I was thinking actually of leaving the NHS. Right, there were several things going on for me at that time. And I needed to have a clear understanding of what was going on. So I started this prayer maybe for 2 or 3 months. By the end of that period, and there was a definite date that I knew I had to make a decision. By the end of the 2 or 3 months, I knew what I had to do. I had my mind made up. Now, some people, they say that when they do such prayers, they have dreams, they get answers, they get direct communication. Some people who I know are very, pious people, never tell a lie, are not easily fooled, aren't confused by things. They tell me these kind of things. I believe them, but I don't have that personal experience, I wish I did, but I don't, right? But I certainly have this feeling of certainty at times. At other times, there are certain things which come to light, certain understandings which I gain, which give me this understanding of this constant presence.
And do you feel the constant presence, or is it just you see that and you logically connect the constant presence, or do you feel it? Obviously, some
Yeah.
of the people you talk to have if you like, mystical experiences, but you don't. But do you,
Mm.
do you feel a presence?
I think, Jonathan, I think it's like a house with windows and the lights. You can switch, or you can close the curtains and you can close the doors and you can say there is no light, or you can open it, right? There are times when I close the doors. There are times when I'm angry or I'm upset, or when I don't want to think about this right now. You know, there are other ways that you can actually close the doors. In Islam, if you lead a less than pure life, in various ways, um, if you give way to your excesses, if you spend all your time binge watching on Netflix, and all of these kind of things, you're essentially closing the curtains and closing the doors, right? So there are techniques to open the doors and to close them, to open the windows and let the light in, or
And
not. So yeah,
and is fasting one of these techniques?
absolutely. Yeah, fasting is one of those things. Fasting is one of those techniques. Sending prayers upon the Prophet Muhammad is one of those techniques. It's a very important um, technique in Islam. Seeking forgiveness is one of those techniques. Uh, a giving of charity or purifying your wealth is one of those techniques. The freeing of a slave or a bondsman, which obviously we can't do in the same way that it used to be, um, is also one of these techniques. These are all techniques to get closer to God and to let the light in.
And when you do that, because I'm aware that you're a psychiatrist, you're
Yeah.
aware of, I presume you're aware of the sort of multiple aspects of yourself, that you're not just a singular sense of self, that there are other aspects of yourself which have
Mm.
a sense of themselves. Let's take angry Musa. There's a different sense of the self. Is there any one sense of the self that can connect, that can feel this divine force, or can all forms of the self feel it?
I think that in Islam, and I think in other parts as well, you know, I'm thinking of Buddhism or certain aspects of disciplines of Christianity. There is a certain path to be able to feel it. There's a way to do it, you know. And one of the things that I'm really interested in when I went off to do my PhD in kind of psychosis in King's, right? And I was looking at neuroimaging, and so a lot of the discussion then was about psychedelics, cannabinoids, and psilocybin, and there was this idea. There were some papers being published, about how these drugs lead to enhanced spiritual experiences, unification with the self, and these things. There's an author, Michael Pollan, you might have read of. He's written about these kind of things as well. There's others, um, uh, Robin Kahart Harris. There's groups from Imperial and others, who are talking about these kind of things. The thing is, Jonathan, from my point of view, you can alter the biology of the brain and give it the likeness of a mystical experience by popping a pill. But you cannot replicate the actual spiritual path or spiritual experience by taking drugs, right? There is all religions, faiths, creeds which advocate towards this religious or spiritual experience or the spiritual ecstasy must start necessarily with a kind of moral discipline and a spiritual discipline which leads to that. Drugs don't do it. A kind of
Let's dig into that, because
yeah.
I was a few months ago. I was on a walk with someone who works at Imperial on one of these studies.
All right.
They
Yeah.
they use the word psychedelic to mean a
Yeah.
whole range of experiences which don't involve putting anything inside the body at all. They use it in very broad terms. I spoke to someone else who does studies there. I know some of them,
Yeah.
but I also am aware that what you're sort of doing is you're labeling an experience which comes from consuming something
Mm.
as a non-valid experience. But I am also aware that by not consuming food, you're actually consuming other things, because the body goes through chemical changes that
Mm.
it wouldn't otherwise have had that day, because it's having less food. Uh, and But I'm also aware from my own experiences that through many means you can experience, if you like, spiritual or divine
Mm.
experiences, some of which involve consuming things, some of which don't involve consuming things. In my experience, there's remarkable similarity. Often,
Mm.
what's the base of it is some form of ritual, but ultimately, and this is within my book in slightly cryptic ways, but ultimately you're just traveling. When you go on your fast and you enter Ramadan, you enter these prayers,
Mm.
you are moving outside the the realm of the habitual, outside the realm of the normal, and you're creating a new space, which were you to do it every day of the year would just become normal and habitual. That's why you kind of limit it to a month. Otherwise, it loses its vuv. So as soon as you do that, you open yourself up. If you travel, you open yourself up. There are religions. There are many religions. There's many deeply spiritual and deeply moral practices which have sacred medicines. And you go, in Africa it's famous, in in Mexico and down through South America, this is very well known. So we can't just rule out these deeply spiritual
Sure. Look.
communities because they did something you called a drug, but it's not a drug to
Oh,
them.
wow. Jonathan, look, the thing is that um, I'm not invalidating the experience in the sense that I accept, of course, that these drugs produce altered mind states,
Do you
right?
accept that? Do you accept those the certainly those cultures don't see them as drugs, possibly because they don't have
Sure.
well,
No,
they didn't have a
I
conception of
think that
drugs.
there are some cultures, there's a few cultures where tobacco or psychedelic chemicals, you know, have had important ritual power, and those altered mind states have taken on a certain symbolism and a meaning. I accept that, Jonathan, right? But saying that the whole of the culture or the whole of the experience is about popping a pill, I think fundamentally misunderstands the importance of the kind of ancient cultures, practices, and spiritual practices, which are about a path, a way, often associated with, spiritual and moral improvement. The two go hand in hand. There is no shortcut to that.
So hang on, I think your
Yeah.
imagination of your imagination of things may not be the same, but of course there is a wide range of practices, and you have
Mm.
also the commercialization of psychedelic therapies or the commercialization of
Sure.
psychedelics. This stuff doesn't happen outside capitalism anymore, which brings its own which brings it which brings its own dynamic. But I mean, what I'm aware of is within societies, people will go
Mm.
away. They will go on a diet. They will go on
Yeah, yeah.
a limited diet. They will. Sometimes people go without. There's what's it called, the Vision Quest or something. It happens out in Mexico. It's very popular on the wellness scene.
Mm.
But they go 3 days without food or water. They just sit up in a mountain on their own, or they'll be before a ceremony involving peyote or ayahuasca. The body is limited in what it takes beforehand. There is a diet. I mean, don't these things, and the diet will include things like no sex, no alcohol, none of these
What I,
following foods. It
Jonathan,
doesn't that follow your map of how to connect with the divine?
yeah, sure, Jonathan. My question is, what are you after, right? Are you after a kind of buzz or a spiritual intoxication or a feeling of high, somewhat similar to a kind of hypomanic or manic episode? Because if you are, I can take you to any kind of psychiatric ward up and down the country, and we can find three or four people who are frankly, very high and very euphoric and elated, but are not clearly in their senses and have been detained under the Mental Health Act, right? Or are you look after a kind of spiritual progression or deeper understanding of life? And I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that this is not the way. That just taking psychedelics by themselves will take you down that route or down that path. Although it may mimic it, it may make you feel like you understand the meaning of life and that everything is clear. But essentially, that is just a neurobiological chemical experience which is open to anybody and is not the proper way of undergoing the path.
Whoa. God,
Yeah.
so much information all at
So
once.
come on.
Undergoing the path. It was the article there.
Yeah.
That tripped me up at the very end. So
Mm.
once again, we have a projection of what people are doing when they do this. We have a projection of what they're going through, and we have lumped them all together. Probably now in their millions, we've lumped them all together as going through something and then dismissing it as not valid.
I'm not saying it's not valid,
And hang on,
Johnson. Yeah.
and also saying it is unmessy, and that and at the moment it wears off, they remain the same.
No,
But of
no.
course, what
I
they're
don't I
reporting
don't
back is
agree with
very
that.
different.
No, Johnson, that's not. I mean, firstly, I'm not saying it's not valid.
Hmm.
I'm saying if you're saying that it's a route to spiritual progress, then it's not valid. It's a
Because
real what
why
because
isn't it valid?
spiritual progress is about um, persistent progress, and it's you cannot disentangle it from kind of moral improvement.
Okay, but once again, we're working off imaginations of stories. So let's
Yeah,
take the story you're working off, and give them a persona. Let's call them Dave, just to make it
sure.
easy. Dave likes spent most of his youth drinking and smoking fags, and then he got into weed, liked weed, and then he found some acid and got into acid, and then
Yeah.
and he likes mushrooms. He goes out high and he goes clubbing. And he loves partying, and he's going, oh, I'm gonna take this. Well, I've seen the gods, and I'm back on the stretch, totally unaffected.
What do you mean by that?
How do you
So,
mean?
so sorry. I've heard that story obviously many times, right? And I've never seen somebody who's dropped acid in a club and suddenly life has suddenly made sense to them, and they have kind of,
So,
um, yeah.
they are affected. This story that they're unaffected for however that effect can be, and it could be quite
Mm,
detrimental. It could be life changing positively.
sure.
We don't know. It's a bit of a random guess at that point. But this is a character. This is one character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Then
Sure.
we maybe have another character who is soul searching, and they're
Mm,
doing their yoga and they're doing their chants. They're going to gong baths and they're doing all this, and then they decide to do something. They go on some retreat for 7 days in Costa Rica or something, and during that retreat, they go through some ritual where they take some sort of psychedelic and they deal with issues of themselves, and they deal with and maybe they feel the presence that you talk about, or it might be a different god for all I know. Um, and and then they come back and they are transformed, or they eat more healthily, or they do more yoga, or they join a church. Who knows what they do, but they feel transformed by it, and they might go back the next month. They might go back the next year.
mm.
They may never go back at all. There's lots of different ways of relating, but
You
what
know,
you're saying, but what you're saying in all this is they never saw the God. My God is the true path. This is the only path, and you know that because it says it at the beginning of your book, and it says in your book you can't believe anybody. I mean, it's a really strong message. Don't believe anyone. There's only a few believers out there. So what's going on there? You seem to have become
actually,
dogmatic.
in the Quran, I think this is what you're referring to, right? Within the early part of the book, and I can show you if you want. It says that whoever believes in God and the last day, whether they be from, I think, the Muslims or the Christians or the Sabians or the Jews, um, they will be amongst the rightly guided. But you're right, there is a lot in especially in the early section on on defining what the path is, what the path is not, and particularly in the early section, which often strikes readers of the book, on describing what's called the munafiqeen, or who the hypocrites are and what their attributes are, and that I think people sometimes find very difficult.
Mm.
Um, However, I suppose what you're saying is, yeah, am I being dogmatic? Perhaps I am. What I am saying, Jonathan, is that I don't think that dropping acid leads to a spiritual or moral change. Okay, I've spoken to lots of people who have, taken that path. I treat lots of individuals as well. Um, And I don't find kind of necessarily a moral refinement from that path. I've just never come across it. I haven't. I think I've got lots of people who think they are kind of self-satisfied. In fact, there was a concept I came across in an academic paper. Really good. It was called spiritual narcissism. Maybe we'll do a show on that.
That's
Maybe you
very
could,
well.
if
That's very well known.
maybe you could argue that I have an element of spiritual narcissism. I don't know, Jonathan. I want to be humble and accept other people's experiences, but I do think you have to do the hard work for spiritual change.
But
In
what?
the
Okay,
hard work, yeah.
because what you're saying is that these rituals,
Mm.
these imbibing of medicines, and we're not talking about the people who end up in a dropping acid. I think that's almost a different thing. But let's go.
Well,
Let's
no,
go.
I
Hang
think
on,
that,
hang on, hang on.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
finish. So let's go back to those rituals and those medicines. You're saying that's not hard work. They just sit there and they're just in a trippy, blissy state. That's what you're kind of imagining is going on, isn't it?
Jonathan, by hard work, I mean, I think you have to make the moral change within yourself. And that starts with self negation, denying certain things to yourself, and understanding the fundamental oneness of humanity. I think that's hard work. I think, giving charity is hard work. I think, engaging in your prayers or spiritual practices or your chants or these kind of things, that's hard work. Um, what I often find is people are looking for shortcuts to this kind of spiritual bliss, and you're not going to find it in a pill. And I
Yeah.
think it's very, very pertinent to this day and age, because you do find, people are trying to package up these pills and trying to say that they are the panacea to everything.
Right.
And I think there is
So
a concern about that. Yeah,
so you have the commoditization of culture. You have the massive health and wellness market. You've
yeah,
got, but what you're tending to do, and you're doing it again and again, is going, my way is the right way. And all these people have come out and said, my God, my life's changed. I'm changing the way I live, and I'm changing how I'm being with other people and how I'm with myself. All that was nonsense. And when people said,
no, no,
"My
no,
God," hang on, when
yeah,
I felt some sort of presence for the first time in my life, you're saying that's nonsense. That's just a psychochemical reaction. And me, my body, with
mm,
my religion, doesn't have any psychochemical reactions whatsoever. I'm pure because I'm on the. You use the word the path. I find
mm,
that incredibly. It's a bit. It's a side of you I hadn't seen. And I find it very,
yeah.
knowing me as you do, I find it even more problematic.
I think it kind of leads on to another question, isn't it, Jonathan? Which I think is, perhaps we should take this up in another podcast. But the fact is that any religion, faith, political grouping, any ideology has got to have boundaries to it, doesn't it, Jonathan? It's part of this. This is what's encapsulated in this, and this is what's outside of it, right? And even if you take right wing or left wing, these things, if they mean everything, if these terms mean everything, then they're not defining
But
anything
Musa,
very well.
you,
Yeah,
you know you're adhering to a religious, cultural, historical, economic, political system,
yeah.
which itself, where do we draw the boundaries? It's very difficult. It's a heck of a broad church.
Sure. I suppose, Jonathan, that is maybe perhaps why the Quran starts with drawing the boundaries, isn't it? It's very definitive boundaries. Some people really struggle with that.
Well, it's the way it's the way it takes a similar position. It says only I, whoever's reading it, is
Mm,
true. Those people who this is how I read it. Those people who say they're true believers aren't true believers. I mean, it's cult
yeah.
mentality at its worst. It's and it's spiritual
I
narcissism at its
sure, sure.
worst.
I would argue with you, Jonathan, is that it's actually giving you the attributes of which things to avoid. You know, of saying one thing in one group and then another thing in another group. You know, it's telling you that. if you only progress when uh, you are suddenly when frightened by lightning or fire, but other times you turn back, you know, then that is an attribute, or that's not to be admired. The attribute to be admired is that you have a certain stability, a certain soundness of mind about you. And so, I mean, lots of people take these passages in very different ways, um, but it's certainly true. I think it's certainly true. You have to accept that Islam is very definitive about these things. Now, there's another element of it, Jonathan. Whether I myself meet that criteria or do not, I don't know. I am not the decider. Ultimately, God is the decider of that. You know,
This is
and
such
that, yeah.
a human cognition. So
Mm,
God, the judgmental God, the God who comes in and says, "Good person, bad person, good faithful, bad traitor." I mean, it's a very human cognition. I don't see the universe and all of material existence doing any of that. I just see it as a human cognition. And I was once religions start doing it, I see the human story. And of course, if
mm,
as religions often form from a point of oppression, they are also a political story about building alliances.
mm.
This isn't the God I know.
The question is, Jonathan, I think, is how do you get to the God that you know or that we recognize? There has to be a path. If you say, well, all cultures, all values, all practices are equally valid, then we have a problem there, right? Because clearly there are some practices or some understandings or some ways of being, which are optimal to the human soul or to the human self, isn't it? And therefore, it is important to define and to determine what they are. That
Uh,
is what is called the path. It's called the path. It's the
it,
same
it,
in, yeah.
it, it reminds me actually of something I read in Reform. They were going to come into
Oh yeah.
families and sort out British families. I thought, well, that's getting a bit micromanaging, isn't it? Um, I can't get where you're coming from, because what you're coming from is
Mm,
whatever you're thinking must be right, and part of what you're thinking, the way it narrates its way around that is, I'm exploring the path. I'm finding a better way, but there isn't the path. And there might not actually be the God. You see, one of the things in my
mm,
book, I say, look, we're in a constant states of transcendence. Every moment of the day, I'm in a slightly different, and as you can just about hear your kids in the background, as you go out to be dad, you'll be someone slightly different with them.
mm.
We're constantly going through that, and as we meet our gods, or as we have these experiences, we might all be sitting in the same room, but experience something very different. It's very hard. As you said earlier, it's very hard to express what that thing is.
Yeah.
So, because that's going on with you, and we don't know where we are, we just feel we're in a transcendent space, but we're in a transcendent space when we watch the football. This also takes us somewhere else. But there's one set of transcendent spaces is this feeling of being with something that is far bigger than ourselves, far bigger than ourselves, far wiser than ourselves. This sense of this other existence of which we are just part of its way. That's quite a common experience. But to prescribe, I have the only method available, and it must be done by the following ways.
Well,
I do,
yeah,
I do,
yeah,
I
I
do.
mean,
How does the stuff that makes the stars
yeah.
come out with that strange sentence? The sort of sentence that would work for a parent with a child.
So no,
It's very
hang about.
odd.
Hang about. I think, Jonathan, the question is that man, and by man I mean humankind, has got to deliberate on what the purposes of their existence, isn't it? Right? And ultimately, in Islam, And in many other faiths, the purpose of humankind, mankind, is to recognize and to worship and to understand the majesties of their creator. And there is a way of doing things. There's a path to follow for that. And the path,
Singular path.
well, it's a very comprehensive path. It doesn't say that you have to do this at exactly this time, or but there are several different avenues you can pursue there. But the path essentially is centered around moral improvement, essentially, Jonathan, right? And if you throw that behind your back, this is what Islam would say and what the other faiths would say. If you throw that behind your back and you say, well, that's not important, I want to live my life the way I want to live it, constrained by these constraints or these chains.
Yes, what do you mean by moral improvement? You could have had a range of things. I mean, there's a lot of things which I would find very immoral might be in your moral improvement.
Sure, Jonathan. I think that the souls, generally have a good understanding, each individual one of us, as to what is the sense of morality, and we may disagree here. You may say that no, morality is culturally driven and there are differences in culture, and, so for example, you may argue that in certain cultures, cannibalism is culturally acceptable and not in others. You may argue this. I think that actually, essentially, understanding of what morality is essentially universal, and we know what it is. We can begin to define it or tease it out. It is the giving of charity, it is the doing of good, it is the saying of a kind word, it is the not making life all about yourself. It is the
But what you're
relevant.
saying,
Yeah,
is all those, because you sort of dismissed the whole world of imbibing things to take people on a path. You dismiss
sure.
that as a stroke. You're saying all those people who have done that and found themselves then being more charitable, being a better person in their community, looking after their environment more, looking after their bodies more, looking after their family more.
Oh, I'm
But
not sure that.
surely they
Yeah.
weren't on the path. They were just. That's what I don't get. You
No,
seem to
no,
have a
no,
quite
Jonathan.
an
I'm
authoritarian view of this.
sure. I mean, you can bring me empirical evidence to confront me. I'm not sure I've found that many people who have, dropped acid and suddenly done all of those things.
What about let's not go to the chemical side. Let's
Sure.
go to those cultures which were
Mm.
previously and for a long time uh, using one substance or another in a ritualized setting in order to understand their
Oh,
own
yeah, sure,
spiritual
sure.
development.
But I would say that this has been commoditized now, Jonathan,
That's
in the way.
that's a separate
Yeah.
issue.
I don't think that those cultures are purely defined by that single experience.
That's
There are
absolutely right.
many. There are several aspects to that experience. There are just some things that we as Westerners like to go, picking out. Oh, right,
That's
they
right.
spoke this.
Of course, the
Yeah,
culture is far bigger. Far bigger. The English
sure.
culture is not psychiatry, although it does inform a lot of it. Um,
Yeah,
but you seem to think that your path is better than theirs.
I think that any faith makes that argument, doesn't it? Any religious grouping makes that argument. Any political
Doesn't that
party
give you
makes
a
that
clue?
argument.
Doesn't that give you a clue as to the nature of the nature of the beast? They
I'm
all make that
I'm not quite
argument.
sure what you're saying,
They
John.
if
Yeah,
all religions, all parties, all football clubs make out that they are the only way, what we know is that's
yeah.
a story these things tell, but it can't possibly be true. One of the aspects of belonging to something is often to think that you're exceptional. It's just an aspect of
No,
it.
Jonathan, I don't. Hang about. I think what you're saying is that if they all make the argument, then we happen to know that they all can't be true, right? I happen to think that there's truth in many of them, But yes, I would agree with you that all can't be mutually exclusive and they can't be true. that doesn't mean that none of them is true. And we just say,
Well, only one of them can be true. There can only be one winner of the championship.
Well, either one of them is true, or
look, I'll tell you what. I think because we've been going on for an hour and 10, and we're not going to get to the bottom of this, which is quite interesting. So let's reconvene because we came quite a way out of fasting, but I think we found. I normally we don't disagree so much, but I'm just perhaps I think I found a nugget of your dogmatism.
Perhaps a fault line between us, Jonathan.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, let's see what happens.
Sure. Yeah, well, we'll take this up in another podcast then.
Yeah, we will. And meanwhile, enjoy your reflections and your reflections on others.
Okay. Thank you very much.
See you, Musa.
Bye.
Bye.